Welcome back to a special edition of the DailyFlip podcast. We're not going to have a number on this one because we're talking about the debate. We're going to be doing a analysis, so that's the only story we're going to be talking about. We still will do a daily delight, of course, to make sure that you end this podcast on a positive note, taking on the day with a happy mood. But let's get into what everybody's probably talking about, the controversy, the back and forth, the debate between the orange man and the old man. And I'll be honest, it's been a pretty long night watching the debate itself, watching commentary afterwards, and other extraneous things that have happened. But you don't care about my personal life, you care about the commentary, and you care about somebody's analysis of how the debate went. This will be a little bit shorter than normal. We'll make it about 20 minutes at the absolute most, which is the longest segment that we normally do anyway. So, the commentary afterwards, I don't agree. The conservative media outlets that I looked at, they had their bias, of course. They were saying it's one of the worst things that President Biden has ever done. And then there were even the places like Breaking Points that were trying to I don't want to say they were hamming it up, but the progressives on that show and the conservatives on that show don't like Biden anyway. So I think they're coming away with a very particular point of view. I think the most interesting commentary was the Anderson Cooper moment when he was able to actually kind of be honest and ask, okay, can you say this was a good performance for Joe Biden when he was talking with Kamala Harris? Even that commentary coming out of Anderson Cooper, who, let's be clear, he is a journalist who tries to be objective, but he has his own biases. He is leaning towards the liberal side very often. The most pertinent commentary that you're going to get out of everybody is, oh my gosh, look at Joe Biden. And as a person who is politically informed, I need to be careful with that, because while I am aware of a lot of the things that Biden does, I'm not the most in-depth researcher. I don't know every single proposal he's put forward. I don't know every single policy off the top of my head that he has actually been able to implement and how that has he has gone about that and how they've actually been implemented. So to make that statement that the politically informed will understand what he was talking about during this debate, maybe that's not 100% true. I am not the most politically engaged, but for the most part, in a lot of the situations where he messed up or he was stuttering or he may have misstated something, he definitely has the allusions to it in previous policy proposals that he's put forward. We know, at least those of us that are paying attention, know what he's talking about for the most part. So maybe that is my understanding, or having a little bit of a more politically engaged perspective that really shines through and says, I didn't think it was that bad for President Biden. Not as bad as the commentators on every single side are saying. And there was the one moment that made my heart sink is when he was going on his rant and then ended with, we beat Medicare. And that I felt something visceral. I was experiencing a sinking of my heart. And I said, wow. And I went back and watched it again. This was within the first 4 back and forth kind of question sessions. And that is not a good place to start. The next question also wasn't the best for him either. After that, he kind of leveled out. I wasn't able to actually look at the visuals. I was listening to the audio for most of it. So whether he's staring off blankly or he has a dull face, I was able to notice a few moments like that in the first section that I was able to rewatch. But for the most part, I can't comment on all of those. But most of the points that he was making, or the counterpoints, he was trying to be consistent. He had the same canned line of, Donald Trump is so foolish. Oh, that is some of the most malarkeyest thing that I've heard, so on and so forth. That was a canned line that he repeated multiple times. And obviously he's trying to strike home a very particular message. But for those of us, like I said, that are politically engaged, you at least have some idea of what he's trying to say. Now, does the average American viewer know what he's trying to say? No. Then the inverse needs to be, because that's probably how you would want to view it, and you say, well, it's terrible by that case. I want to take a second to do the inverse. Trump does a lot of random talking. He does a lot of pointing here, pointing there, this. And sometimes he's able to explain himself, sometimes he's not. And even though he does it in a confident way, that doesn't mean that the average American person is going to know what he's talking about. The normie voter is not going to necessarily know what he's talking about. And that does make things difficult sometimes. So if it's an issue for Joe Biden, it's also an issue for Trump. The main thing that will come out of those two is not the fact that he wasn't making his point the most eloquent delivery. He wasn't giving it that extra oomph and really selling it and having great rhetoric. Trump doesn't always have that either. But the fact that he was stumbling over himself and it was ineloquent, it will get blamed on the fact that he was stumbling over himself and not the fact that he is just ineloquent like Trump, who he was not stumbling over himself that much. He did say some things that were like, oh, okay, yeah, cleanest water. Yeah, we have the cleanest water. I sat back, I said, what is, because I didn't even understand. I was, okay, what EPA regulations? Where is he getting this information from? I'm sure there will be fact checkers coming out tomorrow with the backing who say, yes, this is the EPA people that he brought with him out of the regulatory agency, and they have some sort of data that they provided to him while he was doing his little training session in Mar-a-Lago. And I'm sure Snopes and other Snopes, however you want to pronounce it, they'll come out with their counterfactuals and they'll say, no, actually, this isn't true. It wasn't the cleanest water. But those moments where I couldn't track it, at least one person sounded more confident than the other. But I honestly do not believe that this is the career-ending debate that every single person is saying that it was for Joe Biden. I do agree with a lot of the commentary beforehand, and I was kind of going back and forth. Hey, Trump doesn't have an audience to play to. Yes, he doesn't have an audience to play to, which means his most top-notch, I am playing off the energy that these people are giving me. Sure, it was not there. So you could say that that was a detriment to him, but the cutting off of the mics was actually very good for him. Then again, I don't know if he stayed relatively controlled because they had one or two little back and forth moments, and it was actually good that Trump said, "Let's not be children here. We don't need to be childish." The fact that he was the one, actually, that was pretty good, Trump. But my point being, the fact that he said that rather than Biden is definitely a tally in his category. When last time Joe Biden was the one, especially in the first debate, that was just getting hammered by a angry, vindictive, childish Trump. And I think everybody acknowledges that, even the people that love Trump. They said, yeah, that probably wasn't the best thing for him back in the day. And I think he stayed composed for the most part. There were only one or two moments where there was actual talking, maybe four, where there was enough talking that you could hear a coherent sentence and not just a few words when the mics were cut off. So I don't actually think, if Trump would have stayed, the question is, would Trump have stayed as composed and known not to talk, which I believe ended up benefiting him. Him sitting there with his smug little grin probably ends up benefiting him a little bit more, and not interjecting and not being the on top of you dogged attacking Trump. I think that's going to actually benefit him. But the real question in my mind is, would he have done that if those rules weren't in place? I don't know if he would have. So that's why I'm saying that the rule where they actually have to cut the people off, the mic will be off if they're not the ones speaking. I think that actually benefited Trump because I can't even get this point in, which is interesting to me that multiple times they actually let the other person speak. They let the people go back and forth, and it led to some pretty funny moments, also some pretty stupid moments. So it was probably a good thing overall. Maybe we should have that policy in RNC primaries, because guess what? You wouldn't have, it was 7 people on the stage at one time trying to talk over one another. Maybe we should actually have that implemented. And obviously, it doesn't benefit Trump because he loves his one-liners. He loves being able to punch in there and interject. But I think he played off the Biden flubs very, very well. But I also think Biden was consistent. Even if he didn't always make his message the way he wanted to, he had his points that he kept on hammering. And let's be clear, Trump also had points that he kept on hammering. It is the nation in decline. Trump is the better option for the global perspective that people have, or excuse me, the national perspective of people around the globe have of the United States. Is it a nation on the rise or a nation in decline? Is it a powerful nation or a weak nation? He kept hammering this home that Joe Biden makes us look weak on the world stage, which is fair enough. But I think that the fact that Biden had his consistent messages of look at what he had done, this economy that he had built out was for the rich. These sort of points, hey, I'm fighting for you. I want to make sure that the average income either goes up or inflation comes down to lower some of these costs. I'm trying to look for housing. These were consistent themes that kept going on throughout. He's playing on his only strength in the polls, which is I care about you. And Donald Trump tried to chip into that at one point in the middle of the debate, and I don't know if it necessarily worked. Biden came back at him, and whether or not you agree that he was the most coherent and he was actually able to string the sentences together well, he did string some sentences together and present a counter argument to Donald Trump, who he kind of responded, but not really. So the point I wanted to get at with that very first section where we're breaking it down is the media, the people on the outside media spectrum, the people that are sitting in, the breaking points, the Daily Wire, and those are the two that I was able to get some perspectives from the very beginning. Daily Wire obviously comes in with their perspective ahead of time, which is Trump is the better of the two candidates. He has the better policies, and Biden is old. They were trying to boost some of the how should I say, the predictions. They were trying to say that Biden's actually going to do better towards the end of the week as we got closer to the debate, as they said Trump should as well. And Breaking Points always had this question, which is Biden going to be able to perform? The expectations are so low. And the fact that they reacted the way they did, believing that Biden came in underneath the expectations, which were already so low, I don't know. I really don't. Maybe it's because my expectations were extremely low for Joe Biden, and the fact that he survived and he didn't have multiple of those senior moments, maybe that's why I'm willing to say that he actually made it through okay. But just like the commentary is all of this stuff with Trump about the convictions and his misdeeds, his belligerentness when he's speaking, his ability to overplay the importance of certain issues and be overly bombastic, hyperbolic, how all of these things are baked in. I'm going to be honest. I think at this point, Joe Biden's age is also baked in at this point. No matter how much his media team, no matter how much any of the media teams say, oh, behind closed doors, he's great. I promise you. I think that every common day person can actually perceive this. Then again, I don't touch grass. Okay, I do not touch grass as often as some people do. I have had many, many conversations with people who, there are some that are in my family. There are some that are around the area I live in right now. There are some that are a little bit further out in the Valley area, which is, I've talked about this before in the past, but there's an area where I was also raised in the later part of my years where it's a little bit more conservative, and maybe that's why they have the opinion out there that, yes, well, okay, one's definitely worse than the other, and they're talking about Trump, but they're also saying, yes, Biden has some mental problems. The people that are a little bit closer to me in my circles that I would see on a more regular basis, some of them don't necessarily see it as often, and then there are other members of that circle that say, no, it's a non-Trump thing. I don't care who the other person is on the other side. It's a non-Trump thing. So I think at this point, it's baked in. I think that they have done a semi-okay job saying with Biden's age comes wisdom. And I think that is just like the Trump stuff. It is something people have already taken into account. They are sitting there saying, yes, I know he's old. I know he makes flubs. I've seen some of them myself, but he's not Donald Trump, or he still cares about me, or this policy, that policy worked well. And Trump tried to talk about policies, but Biden definitely talked about policies a lot more. And while that is going to be boring to people, it also wasn't necessarily contrasted by Trump's one-liners as much. He had a few moments where he was able to play off the final sentences of Joe Biden, like I said, but without his one-liners and his zingers and him being truly entertaining, then, and I'm just saying that I know, I'm going to back up. I know that when people propose policies, it doesn't necessarily sink through to the American people. Obama proposed policies, but he did it in such a way that it really caught the ear of people and it really drew them in. So it wasn't just about the policies, it was about the way he said it. So I understand Joe Biden just having a whole bunch of policies and saying them is not necessarily going to bring in more people, but I think that there are enough twinkling moments, there are enough things that are good within, or at least passable within his performance, that the people who want Joe Biden to be on the ticket. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm saying the people who actually want Joe Biden to be on the ticket, the people that are in the DNC that are okay with Joe Biden still being on the ticket, his team, Kamala's team, because Kamala does not want to be forced out. She wants to be the next presumptive nominee once he's gone. This sort of system is going to be able to play it in such a way that these are the glimmers of hope throughout, and they're going to castigate the moments of terrible performance to the absolute depths. And when they replay certain parts, and whether it be conservative media, whether it be mainstream liberal media, the parts that made my heart sink and probably made you say, wow, this is the president of the United States up on that stage, and he is having I don't want to say biggest, but he is having an absolute geriatric moment, they're going to let that slide. It's not going to get presented that much. I mean, Reagan had geriatric moments, not necessarily as much as this. And, obviously it was played up to some degree, but they got past it then. They're going to get past it now. Maybe there is a world where there is some sort of craziness at the convention, and I don't want to say it changes anybody's mind. I don't actually think, I'm too cynical to believe that anything actually changes and there's an upheaval in the Democratic Party before that point. But maybe there's enough outrage at the convention or right before the convention that maybe something could happen, but I think that is extremely, extremely low. I admit that in the past I had said, oh yeah, they'll switch him out for somebody, and that's before I had seen all of his mistakes just be glazed over, and all of the people who I know who are just non-Trumpers or people who are lean more D in general, I heard their opinions. I listened to them, and I started to see at least what they hear and how it formulates into a cohesive worldview or ideology in their mind, or at least when it comes to this election and why Trump can't get in and why Biden's not that bad. So I think that so let's step back once again. And I know I hesitated there, but I wanted to make sure this is coherent. So everybody who's on the conservative side beforehand said, oh my goodness, okay, we made a mistake last time with the State of the Union. We're going to make sure that the expectations are at least above absolutely surviving on stage, so we'll be able to criticize them. Now I think they're going very far with the criticism and saying this is obviously the worst. I think they're overplaying their hand again, and I think that it's not going to resonate the way that they say it will, or even some of the people who are a little bit more on the progressive side. And even Anderson Cooper, who wasn't able to really string anything together, I don't think that they'll be able to actually come out and say, oh, no, that was absolutely terrible. There will be a cohesive narrative, and it'll be something to the effect of Warnock and Gavin Newsom's spin afterwards, which is, no, I have absolute complete faith in him. And Warnock said, oh no, he has the history behind him, the policy proposals and the actual getting the work done. So that's why we're supporting him. There will be the spin doctors that will be out, and it will change very, very little, in my opinion. Maybe there's a slight shift in the polls, but even then, as we saw with the convictions from Donald Trump or the performance of Joe Biden at the State of the Union, these bumps, these changes will be temporary and things will level out. Like I said, the cake is practically baked. We're at like 75%. Maybe something drastic can happen, but I do not think that this is enough to truly unsettle the cake, make it deflate when it comes out of the oven. But that's just my opinion on the matter. So let's jump into our daily delight, because even though we're just doing one segment and it's a pretty long one, we still want you to leave the podcast feeling positive, ready to take on the day. And this one comes from Parade Pets. German Shepherd and toddler enjoy Toy Story together. They are melting hearts. And it's true. I'm going to leave this article linked in the description. It will be the only one linked today. Actually, maybe I'll actually put in a link to the CNN full video of the debate so you can go watch it yourself if you haven't already. But those will be the only two links, and you can follow the bottom one, which will take you to this cute story talking about a toddler and its German Shepherd companion, and they're just kind of cuddling, enjoying their time, watching Toy Story, and really bonding. So like I said, if you want to check out either of those, they'll be in the links in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, which I will be removing soon because I understand they're shutting down, as well as Podvine, and the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. So, thank you for joining me for this episode, this special episode of the Daily Flip podcast. And with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.